This is Podco Media Networks.
Welcome back to Global Citizens. Thanks for joining us for part 2 of our discussion with Cordie Aziz. In part 1, Cordie, a Sierra Leonean American, told us about how she came to be local in Accra and her impressions of the city and a primer on waste management. And now, back to our conversation with Cordie. Tell us a little bit more about some of your programs. I know you have some wonderful partnerships with Dannon.
Yeah, and Eco Fund System. So we have a variety of projects. Environment360 is actually the implementing partner for a project called Picket, which is financed by the Danone Ecosystem Fund and a private company here called Fan Milk. And essentially what it did is it launched the first waste picker-led sorting center in Accra. So we were actually able to work with the chief to donate some land to Environment360. And then on that land, we were able to build a sorting center, which essentially services the immediate community and allows this area to bring in their recyclable waste and actually be paid for it. The waste pickers actually work together in a group, so they actually split the profits of the sorting center. Environment360 provides the business development, the capacity training, as well as just does the overall support and supervision of the day-to-day running of the sorting center. It's also great because when you look at a lot of our projects as well, particularly this one, it's based in a coastal community, and marine litter is a huge issue right now.
Beaches are...
Exactly. Yeah. So we also have another program with GIZ, where we also work with informal sector workers in Jamestown and Old Fadama.
And GIZ is the German
Development Corporation.
Right.
So they're financed under the Business and Economic Ministry of Germany. But essentially what they come in is they provide money for pilot projects that really support. Fortunately, part of our strategy has always been to acquire certain infrastructure that can always be used in the future.
Sure, sustainability.
Exactly.
Right.
So you'll see that we just launched one collection center in Medina, not too far from our head office. And as mentioned, we'll be doing the second one in Old Fadama. We also have a very striving school program as well. So we work with about 15,000 children in about 63 schools here in Accra. Fortunately, we actually just got some funding from UNDP, and we'll actually be creating a teacher academy, which really equips teachers to better bring environmental education into the classroom. So we're developing a variety of educational tools, games, workbooks, curriculums that when teachers actually leave the academy, they'll actually be able to take into their school, and then they'll actually even be able to teach the other teachers there at the school how to use it. So the games and other things that you bring are not only necessarily for your classroom, but they're for your entire school.
Right.
So we're really more focused on scaling at this point. We opened up an office in Kumasi last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So we'll be doing our second phase of expansion in Kumasi as well. So we've also developed a collection center there as well, where we essentially purchase plastics from. We'll continue to do that, and then hopefully in the near future we should be able to expand into something a little bit larger, where we actually can sort of open up full-scale collection of a variety of materials and really aggregate in our own space.
That's wonderful. I want to take a step back because you mentioned that a chief donated land, and so that project, the Picket program, is what I would describe as a quintessential public-private partnership. So you have your corporations, you have your chief. So just for our listeners, the way that land rights work, the chieftaincy basically has all of the land. So every tribe has a different chief that basically they are the controllers of the land. So anyone who's buying land in Ghana is buying land from a chief or a chieftaincy. So in this situation, the chief being a partner to improvement in the community, because we have some that are not. So this is a great boon and a model for other chiefs. Has decided, okay, we have space and we want this to be something that empowers our overall community. So this is progressive in that regard too, because we don't have a lot of chiefs who are donating land for public use. It's mostly for the empowerment of their own pockets or, to some extent, their communities. But this is groundbreaking in that sense, I would say. I wanted to also ask a little bit more about what happens with the waste. that you pick or that you're collecting? Where does it go?
Yeah, we actually sell everything here locally on the local market.
Great.
Fortunately, we've actually been blessed enough to really help support the build out of the plastic bottle purchasing market. When we first started collecting plastic bottles, Environment360 was sort of the lone soldier. And the price was about 30 Ghana pesos, so let's say 5 cents. In the past 3 years.
Is that per bottle?
Kilogram.
Per kilo. Okay.
In the past 3 to 4 years since we've actually been doing this, it's actually gone up to 1 CD, which is now about 20 cents per kilogram. We've seen a huge jump in the market. Now, I think since people see established collection systems coming up, I think that people are more willing to actually enter the market. So we even anticipate that we are going to see buyers within the next year that even push it a little bit higher, and we might eventually even get up to about 50 cents per kilogram, which would be quite instrumental here and really have an impact on the informal sector, which is typically owned this particular practice.
Sure. So 50 cents is the equivalent of
about 2 CD, 50 pesos.
2 cities,
so.
right. So that's a more than 100% increase. So that's great.
Yeah.
Who are the buyers? Are they the bottlers?
Okay, so our private sector is starting to get on board. They have launched some initiatives. My concern with the private sector is that they seem to fragment the market. So they seem to empower a lot of different smaller players, which I think is great because they get to say that, oh, we are supporting so many people. But unfortunately, the market is not large enough for you to support that many micro players. So essentially all you're doing is fighting them to fight against each other, right? So you're just making it harder for them to do collection in their area because maybe somebody worked, they had a competitive edge, and now you've come in to support everybody, all of their competitors with the exact same thing. For you, you might think it's a win-win situation, but the thing is a lot of them are sort of locked because they don't have transportation, they don't have additional land. So even as you're empowering everybody, you're actually making it a little bit more difficult for them to make a livelihood because essentially in a real business world, sort of the strongest make it, right?
Right.
So it's not about just the fact that you're in it, it's about the fact that you have to be able to develop a business model that actually works.
Sure.
And it's very hard to do that as a private company when somebody comes along and starts offering you things to actually do collection or to actually further process. Then you get people that feel like since they have the machinery or since they have the support, they're just going to do it regardless, right? So it actually is really sort of fragmenting the market, and it's not really bringing the cohesion of the market together. Because ideally, some of these smaller firms should probably actually be joining hands with each other.
Right.
So they shouldn't really be competing with each other, right? You don't need 5 people in a 10-mile radius or a 30-mile radius. What I do think has worked really well is that we have had some people that are already involved in industry. So some people that are already involved in sort of the plastic industry here and making a plastic products. You see them being more interested in sourcing local material to help bring their costs down.
Right.
So you actually have some of your long-term manufacturers that have been in the business 50 and 60 years that are now have interest in actually purchasing the materials. You also have people that have lived abroad that have come back that sort of see the opportunity in it as well. They also have moved into processing. So it's only really processed, so it's probably maybe baled and flaked here.
I see. Got it.
But the actual like finished product is probably the PET or plastic bottles are still being shipped out to Germany, mainly India, Turkey. These are the main markets that you see the plastic bottles actually being shipped to.
Particularly from this region.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I see. So what would you see as a solution? You kind of hinted at it. It seems similar to the agriculture market where you would just kind of create co-ops. Seems like what the solution would be.
Yeah.
Is that?
Exactly. I think that this actually does work. Even in our informal sector groups, we try to create co-ops. It is a little bit more difficult with the informal sector because you'll find since they're not highly educated, it's hard to trust.
Right.
But mind you, I feel like although this whole sector is informal, so even the people that are maybe the next level up from these waste pickers that maybe have a little bit more business sense, they actually sometimes don't have great business sense. I often mention to people, you know, Environment360, we use recycling memberships to subsidize sort of our cost on this. And then of course, because we're an NGO, we get program funding. But I see so many businesses popping up and me understanding the profit margin within the business. I actually don't know how they're sustaining because I don't understand how you put petrol in your vehicles, how you pay workers, how you have an office, how you keep the lights on. You're definitely running in debt, whether you know it or not.
Sure.
So some people might consider because they went to go sell their plastic bottles today, they got 4,000 Ghana, they're thinking, oh, we earned 4,000 Ghana today. But in real life, you're probably operating in debt. You just haven't realized it. And that's why I said I think that it would be better if private sector actually stepped out, really waited to see who some of the key players were in the market, and then really put more support. Because I think it's very easy to mobilize 4 or 5 tons of plastic bottles once a month. But the thing is, can you consistently mobilize that every single day?
Sure.
Right? That's the difference between somebody that's a formidable player and somebody that's just around sort of holding up the market, fragmenting, taking away materials from other people.
Sure. So this brings me to kind of a bit of a conundrum, which is you have this program in schools where you're trying to teach young people how to be more environmentally focused, and then you have your business. So at some point, you hope that you, on the education side, put yourself out of business, I would think. I guess the question is, I know it's a long way off, but how do you see Ghana in particular, or the region in particular, moving away from having so much waste? And have you seen any significant changes in how much waste we're producing and the time that you've been in this business?
Yeah, I think we have to be realistic. The only plastic we'll probably ever get rid of is single-use plastic, which are the carrier bags. Hard plastic, plastic bottles, these things aren't going anywhere. If they are, it'll be long after I'm dead in the grave.
Sure.
I don't think that it's a threat to really get away from those, so I still think that there's a good opportunity for a livelihood for informal sector waste workers to really be able to do that.
Sure.
I think one thing we do have to consider is that, yes, ideally we will live in a world that there's less waste, but I think that's also a whole human mindset. And I think that our culture, the way we are as humans, nothing about it really encourages minimalism. I think now you have a few groups that call themselves minimalists that really focus on the fact that it's okay to have one pair of jeans and one t-shirt, but in a world where everybody is validated by social media and who's looking cool, and we don't have real connections with people, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where there's less waste.
Right.
I think that there's something about the human ego that's just not set up to operate like that, because we definitely equate what we have materially with who we are as individuals. And I don't think this is a new phenomenon. I think that I believe in God, so I think that even when you read the Bible, you see these same things going on where people were so excited. This is it. Where they were so excited they were put into a certain position, or that they had gathered so much money and wealth that a certain sense of arrogance came about them.
Right.
So I think, once again, we as humans are predispositioned to really want more.
Right.
So I don't see it happening.
Sure.
Because even here, you'll see all Ghanaians complaining about it being dirty, but tell them not to take a plastic bag. They'll act like, oh, so which will I carry it to?
Right. How will people know I've gotten something?
But it's easier for me.
Sure.
Oh, I don't need, I can't use another bag. They'll come up with 1,001 excuses, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we're just not wired to create less waste.
Sure.
The reason we actually have a school program is more to create loyalty, so that as you're coming out, you remember that it's Environment360 that came to your school and did these things. Sure. So as our recycling programs grow and there's options for you to become a purchaser or a buyer, you remember,
and that's your memberships, right?
This is it. You remember that, I remember I was part of this program. Let me get a membership.
Sure. Which is business. That's smart business. I hear you. So that leads us to our next segment, which is the mindset hack. You kind of, mentioned mindset. So what is your favorite or innovative mindset hack that you can imagine or that you know of?
So for me, I think you have to move as everything is possible. I'm reading this book now called Discerning the Voice of God, and it really talks about how humans develop certain strongholds, which are anxiety, doubt, fear. I think that you don't overthink things, right? I think that if you want to be active, if you want to change things, if you want a new life, I think it requires a radical action. And I think that the longer you sit down and think about it and create a pros and cons list and look at all the things that could and couldn't go wrong, or you start seeking advice from others, I think this is actually where the downfall begins. I think people need to spend a little bit less time planning. That doesn't mean just make foolish decisions, but I think you need to be able to know when the iron is hot and to strike it. And I think that if you can successfully do that, then I think that you can radically shift your mind to be bold enough to really accomplish these things. But I think that if you want to make decisions only based on data and what you see and what others are telling you, then I think you'll probably miss out on some of the greatest opportunities that life will present to you.
Okay. So ultimately you're saying don't overthink and be less risk averse.
This
ultimately.
is it. This is it.
Yeah.
It's like they say in the South, scared money don't make money.
Wow, Cordie, it's been great talking to you. I mean, this has been so insightful. I mean, we've worked together, particularly on children's programs. So I look forward to seeing more about that and maybe even collaborating in the future on that.
We still use that, actually.
I'm sure, of course. Yeah. Hopefully, the sponsorship gods will come through and give us more movement to produce more. So Cordie and I worked together on a superhero, an eco-hero, actually a group of eco-heroes, and it's Jaku and the Earth Defenders. We created a pilot called Malaria Madness. And so that was a program that we did together where we went into a school in Jamestown on World Malaria Day and launched the initiative, and really the kids
They loved it.
They
and
really
we still
did.
actually use it around malaria. It's one of these short films that we show in the schools. So it's still actually getting its use.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you'll see your YouTube clicks rise. Of
course. Yeah. And that started as a workbook.
This is it.
Yeah. So then we just evolved it into an animation, which, I think it was great. It's really, it's good to hear.
Yeah, and I'm sure, like you said, there'll be other opportunities to really expand it. But I think that this also shows the power of collaboration as well, which is what I was talking about in the market.
Yep.
I think that that's really critical for your success, and particularly this part of the world as well.
Yes.
You definitely have to be willing to collaborate.
Yes, that is the name of the game. That is for sure. So before we go, I want to get into just one question to ask you as last thoughts. You already mentioned what you're reading. So let me ask you, what are you watching these days?
This is interesting because I feel like I always half-heartedly watch TV anyway. So I'm never
it could be social media, it could be films, anything.
Okay, so good question. As you know, I recently got married, so I probably am watching my husband closely.
Oh, I love it.
Watching him.
Sure, which is
making
fine.
sure we're on track.
Exactly. I love it. That's wonderful.
I actually have made a resolution. I feel like I need to get back on the bandwagon with really being, sort of keeping up more with trends, really seeing what's going on in this green space. One thing I can say, which I'm sure you can relate to as well, is sometimes you get so caught up in being the entrepreneur in the day-to-day running that you sort of lose a piece of that professional development or personal development that you would get if you were working for someone else, because it never seems like there's enough time. Like there's always a problem to solve. There's always something new. So this has actually been one of my things that I'm actually working on. I feel like it's definitely God telling me it's time, because as you know, I'm also expecting my first child. So I feel like this will probably be a shift in sort of how I use my time, how I use my attention, and really see how I can continually improve myself, because I do think it's become a little stagnant. That's why I said I feel being the entrepreneur, I feel like my mind is always on my business.
Right.
So even when I'm doing something, I'm really only half-hearted there, right? Like my full attention is never there, because I'm thinking about what needs to be done in the office tomorrow, who's called me, somebody that said something that pissed me off today, like the strategy I need to apply. So everything I do is really sort of half-hearted because I probably spend so much time.
Oh, you mean outside of work, right?
This is it.
Yeah.
So Environment360 is 150% of my time.
Right.
Everything else is just like 10%. Like I'm watching TV, but I'm really like, yeah, so tomorrow I'm going to call this person.
Yeah, I feel you. So I'm glad to hear that because for me, work-life balance is so important. So that you are conscious that you want to take a step back and figure out how to invest in you. I love it. Like, I think that's great. And this is perfect timing for that. So any last words or thoughts as we sign off?
So I would just say for all my global citizens in the world, I think the world is ripe now. I think particularly if you're based in the U.S., this is the time to really start looking for other opportunities, breaking some of those strongholds that you might have about why you can't do it, why you can't relocate. I think that really if you look at the opportunities that are existing in different parts of the world, I think that it's almost foolish not to take opportunity of some of them. So I think that I really want to encourage people to really sort of dig down, see what it is that you really want, follow some of the instincts and callings and directions of the universe, and really step into the calling. You know, we've got another 40 or 50 days, I think, of the
decade
year.
Yeah, this decade is going. 50 days. And we're
so
2020.
I think this is really a good time to evaluate about what you're going to change, what you're going to do differently, and really not just think about locally, but really open it up and see what's happening on a global aspect. Definitely the time is now. And if you don't strike, you're definitely going to miss it.
Thank you, Cordie. Very well said. This has been Global Citizens with Florence Aziz, and this is the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset for those who want to do something in the world. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for joining us today. As always, you can catch us at www.global, that's with a C, citizenspod.com, and wherever you find podcasts. Thanks again. Bye for now.